Hey there, thanks for stopping by my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. So today we're going to be doing some no-line watercoloring, so let's get started. Alright, so today we're going to be using the Honeybee stamp set called Oh My Whiskers, and I went ahead and stamped my images on some Arches 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, and I used some Ranger Distress ink in pumice stone to stamp those with. And what I did was I did second generation stamping, so I went ahead and I inked up my images and then I stamped them off on a piece of paper, and then I went ahead and stamped them onto my cardstock. I did go ahead still and use my Tim Holtz stamp press just so that I could stamp it multiple times and not have to worry about restamping it in the exact same spot, because using a stamp press, any kind, even a Misty or whatever you have, works perfectly for that. And with the watercolor paper, it's got some bumps on there, so you're going to want to use something or a Stamp-O-Ma-Jig or some kind of thing so that you know you can restamp it a second time. So I'll go ahead and I'll put a link to all the supplies I used down in the description box in case you would like to pick anything up. I really appreciate using my affiliate links to do some shopping. It really helps me out. And also don't forget that up there at the top left hand of the screen, I'll go ahead and put all of the colors I'm using. I am using M.Graham tube watercolors today that I have squirted a little bit out onto a little porcelain plate over there on my left hand side. And then I just go ahead and use some water from my paintbrush to reconstitute it and then use it as a concentrate right on the edges of all of my images. And then I rinse my brush off and then I dab it on my paper towel, and with my damp brush I just pull that ink out into the rest of my image so that it gets lighter the further away it gets from the line. I'm also making sure that I go over the edge of the lines that I stamped so that those will not be visible when I'm done with all of my watercoloring. It will just, because I use the Ranger Distress ink, it will just dissolve right into with the paint and just go right in there. Every time I lay down a layer of paint, I do let it dry, or I move to a different area that's not touching so that it will have a chance to dry, and then I can come back and grow onto the layer I put underneath of it and add more dimension to it as I go. If you don't wait for it to dry, then the ink will bleed into another section you do not necessarily want it to go into, and if you get too much water on there, it tends to just feather out all over your page, all over the wet area. So I do wait for it to dry in between, and then I just come back with 2 or 3 coats and however many I decide I'm going to need. This one here I'm working on another coat on my cat, so I went ahead with my raw umber and I added it to the areas where I want it to be the darkest, like the little raw Sienna cat here, and I did make them 3 different colors so that you could definitely see the difference between them, although you could paint the kitties all the same color just by using different variations of the ink and how much you put on there. You could darken them up, or you could add water to your paint and then dilute it some more so that they're really light colored kitties, or you could paint the whole entire thing with just one solid color, make it a monochromatic painting. Don't forget, if you have watched it this far and you're enjoying the video, to hit the thumbs up button. That really helps me. Thanks a bunch. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue with our painting, and when I'm painting, I do continue to, I wander off and I sometimes will go do other things, and then I'll come back and after it's dried and paint later on. This image here took me about an hour to paint all together. But like I said, I do wander away and go do other things and then come back sometimes. Sometimes I have an hour where I can just sit and paint the whole thing. Sometimes not so much. Depends on what time of the day it is and what Lexi's doing as to whether or not I have time for that. But I do let it dry in between coats a little bit. You can too, if you don't have time for that. You can use your heat tool and just blast it with your heat tool and dry the image and then move on to the next section. I kind of like how it looks both ways. They both look different, but I kind of like how it dries by itself and then I come back and add the next layer after that. So now we're going to hop up here and we're going to work on our first layer of our butterflies. So I'm laying down some mineral violet right along the edge of my butterfly on the line, and then I'm spreading it out with just diluted water on my paintbrush, just a damp paintbrush. These are pretty small butterflies, so you're not going to need too much water on there. And I did use, that was a Princeton round number 3 brush that I've been using so far to paint. When I get more into where I want to do some lines like for the whiskers and stuff, I'm going to switch to a Princeton round number 1. It has a much finer point and it's a lot smaller, holds a lot less water. Okay, Okay, so now we added a little bit of our paint to our middle kitty there, just to start some dimension on that one. I probably won't paint him as dark as I did the other ones, just because I want him to be in the middle and kind of stand out a little bit. But now we're going up here, we're going to add in some paint to our butterflies. They're pretty small, so you're going to want to use a smaller paintbrush. Here I've switched that number 1 I was talking about. I decided that number 3 brush was a little too large for these little tiny butterflies, and so I'm going to switch this number 1. It has a really small fine point, so it works perfect for these little areas. I'll also use the same paintbrush to do the whiskers and the eyes and the little noses on the kitties. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to darken this little second kitty up. I was going to work on the little brown kitty on the right, but I had the wrong color, so I just switched over to this middle kitty to add a little bit more shadows and shading on his little face. And for me, it works better if I kind of turn my image around and pull the image or pull the ink towards me. So that's why I have went around and I kind of tipped my image around in all different directions. And then I wandered off, I let it dry, and I'm coming back and I'm adding some Payne's Gray onto my bucket to add a little bit more dimension. And then we're going to add another coat to our little brown kitty with the raw umber. I'm just darkening him up, kind of adding some dimension to his little paws there too, so you can actually see the little claw marks on there. I drew those right on. And then we're going to go ahead and skip over here to our raw Sienna kitty and add a little dab to his ears. I thought about making them pink, but then I decided I would just dilute the colors that I used for their fur and use that as the color I'm using on in their ears and stuff. Here I'm using that number 1 brush to add their noses in and their eyeballs. I'll put those on there. I can still see them even though I did all that painting over the top, just barely. So what I did is I keep the stamp right next to me, so when I get to that part I can just kind of glance over at it to see where the eyes are if you've already painted over them enough that they're gone. And so I just kind of wing it and put them on there. If you were worried, you could stick the whole thing back in your stamp press and stamp their eyes back on there, but then you would run the risk of having the lines from your stamp pad already or your ink back on the image, and I didn't want to do that. So I'm just winging it here. We're going to go ahead and put the little handle in, and like I said, I can still see a little bit of the handle. I couldn't see this little swoop up to the little latch there, so I just kind of winged it and made sure that it was going in the right direction. Here we're going to add some dimension to that little yellow butterfly so he can be a little bit different color. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my little whiskers, and for me it worked best to pull from the left to the right of my whiskers, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to pull the same direction so that they get really tiny at the end. Otherwise, if I go the other way, they tend to be a little bit fatter at the end. I'm going to hop up here and we're going to go ahead and do the little antennae and the bodies for our little butterflies. We can't forget those because those are included, or they are on the stamp when you stamp it out. And mine were probably a little bit bigger than what they started with, but I'm okay with that. I think they look still okay. Then we're going to go in here, and I had a little bit of white around my little latch there, so I went in and just added a little bit of that diluted Payne's Gray so that we could tidy that up. And then I decided that these little ridges from my bucket should be a little bit more defined, so I'm going in and adding a little bit more dark around there, really bringing those ridges on the bucket out. Then I'm going to go across the bottom or the top of the bucket, and I'm going to go across the back so it looks like you can see behind the kitties to the bucket. Alright, so let's go ahead and put our card together. I use the coordinating die that you can purchase with Oh My Whiskers stamp set to cut out my images there. And then for that little paw print piece, that is My Favorite Things Paw Prints background stamped. And I used some Hero Arts Shadow ink in wet cement, the mid-tone color, to stamp that on there. I thought it'd be cute to have the little paw prints on there. And then all the little design elements on the front of my card are from the My Favorite Things Blueprints 21 die. I don't know if that's still available or not, but I'll try to put a link to everything I can find down in the description box in case you'd like to pick any of that stuff up. Then I'm just using some foam tape to pop it up off the top of my card. And then I'm going to use some liquid adhesive to apply these little half circles on there. I think that'll be hold it a little bit better than my tape runner would. And I'm also leaving a little bit around the edges so that they're not stuck right on the edge of the circles. There's a little bit of brown showing. I think that kind of makes it pop a little bit more. Just kind of placing those on there. And the paper I'm using is from the Honeybee Stamps Oh, I can't remember which one it was, but I'll go ahead and put a link to the little paper pad down in the description box also. I got the Spring Fling one and the Bee's Knees, and I just can't remember which one it was. My sentiment there is from the Purrrfect Sentiment set. I stamped it with some Versamark, and then I used some Ranger super white fine detail embossing powder on it. If you're going to emboss stuff, make sure to use your anti-static powder tool so that none of the excess powder will stick to other things. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach my butterflies up here, and then I'm going to do... I thought about putting some sequins on here, so I'm going to pull those out, but in the long run I decided those were just not going to look, it was going to look too busy, so I went ahead and left those off. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and trim the edges of my sentiment with the scissors. And that's going to do it for us. If you have a question, leave me a comment down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If you would like to see some more close-up pictures or more details about the card, head over to the store blog and I'll put a link to that down in the description box. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. It really helps my channel. And you can also share it with others. I would really like for them to come and join us here. Right about now, you should be seeing a screen with a couple more videos I thought you might be interested in. If you are, click on either one and it will take you straight to that video and you can check it out. Otherwise, I hope you are having a fabulous day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!